You are listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards. Hello, and welcome to this April 23rd edition of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that my theme song is performed by Bombay Beach Revival. You know, it's pretty cool to be an independent podcaster with my own original theme song. So I encourage you to go and listen to other music by Bombay Beach Revival on YouTube and Spotify. I know the band will appreciate it. So welcome to this week's episode. My guest this week is a man who somehow wonders why anyone would find him interesting. Pull up a chair and discover for yourself another example of what makes everyday people the most fascinating people. These are stories from real life. My guest today is Otto Gallaher, who describes himself as a husband, a father of 3 daughters, avid outdoorsman, attorney, ordained pastor, musician, Texan, and an Eagle Scout. Otto, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mel. It's good to be here. I feel like a super fan finally getting to meet his hero. So yeah, this is a real treat. It's a privilege. Thank you.
Oh man, now you put the pressure on me. I appreciate you being here. So you've done a variety of things in your life, and even went from being a construction worker to being a lawyer after you passed the bar exam.
Yeah.
How did you learn to reinvent yourself so completely?
Oh, man. So I think it starts with, I just have a lifelong love of learning. And I think that's at the core of it. And honestly, my time in the Boy Scouts, I really valued that time a lot and learned how to learn a lot of different things and became comfortable learning different things. And so as I've gone through life, I mean, man, my resume is all over the map. It's almost become a problem because when I feel like I quit learning new things, then I look for a new career. And I'm hoping that being an attorney is kind of the last stop on that train, but which is part of why I love it, because I'm always learning new stuff as an attorney. But yeah, I'd been a builder and a general contractor for about 13 years prior to going to law school, and honestly, I pretty well quit learning new things. I mean, I got to where if you brought me a set of plans for just about anything, I'd say, sure, I can build that for you. Let's do it. And so it just wasn't as much fun anymore. And I was ready for something else. And I could also, honestly, I mean, I'm 54 years old at this point, and that would have been, I guess about 8 years ago, something like that started looking like construction was not going to be a forever thing for me. And my body was starting to feel it too. The knees didn't handle it as well. The wrists and other joints didn't handle it as well. And so it was time for something else. And so, I had a midlife crisis and went to law school.
Probably a lot cheaper than buying a car, possibly. Yeah, maybe not. So is there any overlap? Have you found any overlap between the skills you learn as a construction worker and what you do as an attorney?
Yeah, surprisingly, I didn't expect that at all. But yes, there's some significant overlap. I think one of the most important aspects, I practice civil litigation and unsurprisingly, mostly construction law. And the similarity for a lot of my clients, this is the first time they found themselves in this situation where they need an attorney. And so they don't know what to expect. They don't know the process. And most of the clients that I had building were the same way, whether it was a commercial project or a residential project. For most of the clients, it was the first time they'd done anything like that. And so in both situations, your ability to manage client expectations is really going to dictate how successful the project is. And if you can do a good job of managing expectations, then things go a whole lot smoother. But if you just assume that people understand things, and because it's the world you're in every day, right? And so sometimes it's hard to remember that they don't understand anything about your world other than little tidbits they've picked up. So managing expectations from the beginning is super important, and a very very that skill set is very transferable from construction to being an attorney. And the other thing, less significant maybe, is the two busiest days of the week are Monday and Friday in both worlds. So
Getting started and getting done, probably.
well, that, and for different reasons, but typically on Mondays, everybody's Mondays are busy, right? Because it's the beginning of the week, you're trying to get the week started off, and that's not atypical in a lot of industries. But Fridays in construction, you're always, it's either you got to pay guys or whatever. It's a lot of stuff's trying to get done on Friday, and in in the world of litigation, we wind up doing a lot of Friday filings and trying to wreck the weekend for the opposing counsel and so forth. So Mondays and Fridays are busy in both worlds, but for different reasons.
So those seem like very different worlds. Did you feel comfortable? Have you felt comfortable in both those situations?
Well, I mean, obviously, I felt pretty comfortable in construction. I've become more comfortable as an attorney. That was it was a definite switch, and there were some challenges to making that transition, and I'm still making it. I haven't been an attorney all that long, and there's days where in fact, I had caught up with a good friend of mine here in town who's been an attorney for over 25 years, and I was talking with him, and I said, "So, at what point do I feel like I'm competent at this profession?" He's like, "Man, it takes sometimes you still get stuff years in that you go, oh, I don't know if I can do that or not." But that's part of what I like about it. That's part of the being uncomfortable with it forces me to learn things, and so that's why I think this may be the last stop for me on the career train. That uncomfortableness drives me to learn, and I love that.
I'll check back in about 10 years and see if you're still there. So, have you ever had an identity crisis or created one for your family by being such a transformer, reinventor of your life?
Yeah. I mean, my wife's just incredible. We'll be married 31 years this summer, and so she's definitely been my rock as I've been trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, and has always been there and supported me through. I mean, in fairness, all the career changes, we made those together. I mean, it's not like I just showed up one day and said, "I quit my job and I'm going to go do this." I mean, we made the decisions together. And some of them, she was encouraging me before I before I got to that point, just because some of the jobs I've had, it was such a bad fit for me that it was really affecting everybody. And it's funny you mentioned the identity crisis thing, because I guess I was about 40 years old, and I had this really, really difficult uh, experience where all of a sudden I realized that pretty much every major decision I'd ever made in my life, certainly every career decision I'd ever made, was based on my perception of other people's expectations of me,
Hmm.
to the point that I had no idea who I was at 40 years old. And, that's a little disorienting because I mean, people would say, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know, because I had always made those decisions based on my perception of other people's expectations of me, and that that was a great realization. I'm glad I got that. I would have loved to have realized that at about 30. But, whatever. But so it took a few years from that. So I was still in the middle of construction at that point, and it took a few years of just trying to process that before law school kind of materialized as, yeah, I think this makes sense. But that was part of that journey. So yeah, definitely, there's been an identity crisis, and part of how it's affected the family is when I was in positions or jobs or careers that were just a bad fit for me, man, it was bad for the family. Just for a variety of reasons, but yeah, there. I learned the hard way that I'm not a corporate ladder climber. Like I tried that once, the corporate gig, great job, great company, publicly traded company, very, very conservatively run when it comes to, the finances, but they pay people really well. And I had, one of the vice presidents of the company is still a good friend of mine, and was shepherding my career path. I mean, it was the golden ticket, and I was miserable. And it had
Wow.
nothing to do with the people I was working with, who were great people, or the company I worked for. It was a great company. It was because I was a fish out of water. And I did that for 5 years, and I'll never get those years back. But it was hard for the family when I was doing that, and it was just such a bad fit. Thinking that it was the responsible thing to do, when in reality it was a terrible thing to do.
Wow. So, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment so far?
Man, uh, that I've somehow managed to keep my wife married to me for 31 years. And our kids. I mean, we've got great kids. Two of them are adults now, one's still a teenager, but they're just these really just they're interesting young women. They're capable young women. They care deeply about other people. They value themselves. They in Yeah, I think the family. I mean, if I can call that an accomplishment. I mean, a lot of that's, you've got kids, you understand. A lot of it's in spite of me, not because of me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but but that's, when I look back at, some of the poor decisions I made along the way career wise, the fact that I've got this great family of kids that I love to be around, that love to be around us, that I enjoy doing things with, and see other people valuing them, and the skills and the people, the young women that they are. That's easily the thing that I take the most comfort in.
That's pretty awesome. So, as a girl dad with three girls, I also have three girls. So, what kind of comments do people make to you when they find out you've got three daughters?
So the most fun comment that I've ever had, I've got some good friends in Chile, and I've been blessed to be able to go down and visit, and just love Chile. It's a beautiful country, wonderful people. But in Chile, the Chilean Spanish is terrible. Even the Chileans will admit to you they speak terrible Spanish, and they use a lot of slang, which is part of what makes it terrible and so difficult to pick up on. But they refer to little girls in Chile as chanclas, or slippers, right? And so,
Yeah, the kind the grandmas throw at you.
exactly, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. So little girls are chanclas, and a man who has only daughters is a chancletero, or a slipper maker. And so my friends in Chile refer to me as the chancletero. Uh, um, so that's pretty fun. Uh,
That's pretty funny.
but and a lot of times, so I'm, as you said, I'm an avid outdoorsman, and if you can do, I mean, my gear shed, I've got, man, I mean, fly fishing gear, hunting gear. I've got backpacking gear, rock climbing gear, car camping gear. I've got a canoe. I've got a couple of paddle boards and all the dry bags and everything that goes with all of that. And I've got skis. I mean, if you can do it outside, I'm all in. You just let me know. I'll be there, and we're going to go have a good time. And so, and I've managed a hunting ranch before, and so a lot of people, man, don't you wish you had a son? I'm like, why? I mean, my girls have grown up hunting and fishing with me. I'd start taking them hunting when they're about 3 years old. We go dove hunting together, and the girls and the oldest has really adopted that a lot. She and I both volunteer with the Texas Youth Hunting Program, which is a volunteer organization where we're just trying to introduce kids to hunting that don't have access or opportunity to do that easily. Great program. So she volunteers as a guide with that. And I'm a hunt master and a guide. But the other girls, they're just as comfortable, being outdoors and doing the outdoors things. And they've all learned how to work on their vehicles. And so, I mean, I haven't really treated them a whole lot different than I would have if I'd had a son, as far as the things that I go do with my kids. I mean, obviously girls and boys are different. You raise them different. But as far as what I go do with my kids, I'm like, yeah, let's just go do it together regardless. And so the girls come with me on all that stuff. And the kind of my goal with it really is that any guy that's not intimidated by their ability to do quote guy stuff might be worth keeping around. I don't know. We'll see. So,
yeah, I've got 3 daughters, but I also have 1 son.
yeah.
But my oldest daughter and I are the most alike, and we like almost all of the same kind of things.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fun when you have that kind of connection with your kids.
And the other day I was walking into the grocery store with the 16-year-old, and she reaches down and holds my hand all the way into the grocery store.
Oh.
I'm like, man, why would I want a boy? I don't understand why that would be any better than this. What do people think I'm missing? I don't know.
So another part of your life is that you're an ordained pastor,
mm-hmm.
and you told me that you follow Jesus, but with a limp.
Yeah, I definitely.
I love that. I love that line. You follow Jesus, but with a limp.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that comes right out of Genesis, and the story of Jacob wrestling with God, right? And there's a buzzword in contemporary Christianity right now, deconstruction and deconstructing your faith. And everybody thinks that's the latest thing to, it's kind of this buzzword. And I think it's just called faith. I mean, when you look through, the Bible and people that really followed God or really followed Jesus, they all did that. Everybody. They go through this process of what they thought they understood suddenly didn't work anymore. Now what? Okay, let's figure it out. And so this process of deconstruction, and in my experience in following Jesus, I've been taken to the very limit of my understanding and my comfort level, if you will. And then he's always asked me to take another step. And it's always that, like that scene from which of the Indiana Jones movies was it, Temple of Doom, maybe, where he's standing on the edge of the precipice, and it looks like there's no way to get across, and then they scatter some sand or whatever, and like there's this bridge that they couldn't see, and except I've never had any sand to scatter. It's just always, hey, let's take the next step. And honestly, sometimes the next step has been fine, and sometimes the next step has really wrecked me, and yet in the midst of that, it doesn't change who God is. It just changes my understanding of who God is. And so, yeah, I definitely walk with a limp, and and I've gotten to the point where if somebody tells me that they've followed God for a long time and they don't walk with a limp, I'm a little suspicious, frankly, because I think that's just part of the faith experience. And if you've never had suffering or pain as part of your faith experience, I'm just not sure you've been, well, we've definitely been on different paths. I'll say that.
Different from me too. I can vouch for that. But as a musician, you're a multi-instrumentalist and you're a blues fan.
Oh man, yeah.
So a little bit of a tricky question here. Do the blues cheer you up, or is it a musical way of sharing some kind of turmoil that the musician himself is expressing?
So it's a little of both. But so what I love about the blues is its raw authenticity. There's no pretense in the blues, and it's a it's a musical genre that came from suffering, right? And it was a way of expressing that suffering, a way of expressing that sorrow, and a lot of the lyrics, obviously, echo that. And the music itself is extremely emotional and and extremely authentic all at the same time. But then you've got guys like Lightning Hopkins, whose lyrics have a great amount of levity to it, and you find yourself chuckling in the midst of it. The rubber on the wheel is faster than the rubber on the heel. And you just, it's you're like, man, that is just so funny, and which again, even in the midst of suffering, even in the midst of hardship, to be able to come up with lyrics that add levity, that add humor in the midst of it, man, that's just how we've got to live life, right? Because we're constantly in this state of sorrow and joy, and I think the older we get, the more that mix just, maybe we're just more aware of it. I don't know, but you wind up having grandkids around the same time as you're losing your parents, and all this kind of stuff. And so the whole thing of hardship, sorrow, and joy, it's all mixed in there together. And you can get that with the blues like you don't get that with most other genres. It's all right there.
Well, I'm excited to hear you mention Lightning Hopkins because a lot of my listeners know and people who've read my books know that Lightning Hopkins was my grandfather's first cousin. So he's my second once removed or whatever, however that dynamic works. So certainly the most famous relative in my family. Who would you consider to be your favorite blues musician?
Well, Lightning, there's no question. And this was not pre-planned.
By the way, that is the correct answer. That is the correct answer.
But yeah, so I discovered Lightning Hopkins music when I was in undergrad, many many years ago, and first of all, the guitar playing caught me. It was unlike anybody else's guitar playing. He had his own voice in his guitar, much like today Willie Nelson's got a voice to his guitar. I mean, it's Willie as soon as you hear him playing. Lightning's the same way. As soon as you hear the guitar going, that's Lightning Hopkins. So his guitar had his own voice. His lyrics had their own voice. His lyrics were different. And definitely a Delta blues influence, right? But not, but it's his own. He's his own cat, uh, and I just really have always liked the voice that Lightning had, and I mean the others are great too. Don't get me wrong. I mean I love all the blues, especially the Delta blues, but yeah, Lightning's easily my favorite, hands down.
So, by the way, what instruments do you play?
So I currently play with some varying degrees of proficiency, bass guitar, acoustic guitar, mandolin, and drums or other percussion type stuff. I was classically trained on the upright bass. I haven't played an upright bass in a long time at this point, but I was classically trained on that. Also took violin lessons for a while, a couple of years, took piano lessons for a while. I don't claim the ability to play either of those instruments anymore, but at one point in time, I had some proficiency with both of those. Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna have to get together sometime and see if we can write a song. I can write lyrics, but I don't play any instruments.
There you go. Okay.
So
Yeah.
you play instruments, so maybe we can find a way to collaborate.
Yeah. I'm definitely not a lyricist, so yeah, that might be a good collaboration.
That'd be a good pairing. All right, so you seem to be open to discussing some of the mental health challenges that you told me about before. What encourages you to give to others who are doing their best just to make it through the day with grit and enough hope to keep them going? What advice, encouragement do you have?
Man, part of the reason why I'm open about talking about, I've got both clinical depression and general anxiety disorder. And on top of that, I'm kind of the poster child for adult ADD, if you haven't figured that out already. And part of it for me, why I'm open about it, is the problem Well, it honestly ties back to the blues a little bit because, we've got the expression misery loves company, right? Well, I would tweak that a little bit and say that misery needs company. And
Hmm.
when you're in the midst of a mental health crisis, you are convinced that you're all by yourself, that nobody else has gone through this, nobody knows what you feel like, that nobody has ever experienced this before, and it's very isolating. And you withdraw into yourself, and the deeper you withdraw into yourself, the more the voices in your own head sound really convincing. And honestly, those voices in your head are not they're not right. They're just not. And in the midst of my deepest struggle with depression, which I'm glad to say was 14 years ago at this point. Yeah. Um, I had convinced myself that if I really loved all the people that I say I love, then I would pull myself out of the equation because I was the weak link. I was the one holding everybody else back. They would all be better off without me. And if I really loved them, I'd pull myself out. I'd convince myself of that. Now, had I asked any of them about that? No, we didn't vote on it. This is just what was going on in my head, and I was in such a dark place that those are the only voices I was hearing. And
Hmm.
thankfully, by the grace of God and my wife's committed love, we got through that, and we're on the other side of that. But it's still a struggle. I mean, it doesn't just go away. But I just would want people to know you're not alone, and other people struggle with this. And uh, you know raise the flag, reach out, because sometimes just in sharing that struggle, there's some therapy in it. And that's kind of what I'd suggest to other people too is, man, when you see somebody in the midst of a struggle like that, when somebody tells you that they're suicidal, or when somebody tells you about their anxiety, don't try to fix it. I mean, man, unless you've got PhD after your name, you're probably not qualified to fix it anyway. Just walk through it with them. Just let them know they're not alone. Let them know that you're going to share that burden with them. And it's what you hear in the blues, right? It's that shared burden of we're in this together, and we can all identify with this because of the shared suffering that we have. And it's that same kind of thing. And so I think we just need to um, people who are struggling with mental health issues need to understand that there are people out there that are willing to share that burden, and that they're not alone, and that the voices in their own head are almost certainly lying to them, and that talking about it with somebody else, getting outside of yourself, is really, really important for mental health crises.
Okay, that's some valuable advice. And if anybody out there is struggling or needing someone to talk to, certainly reach out to me, and I'll help you in any way I can. I'll help provide resources for you, whatever way I can.
Yeah,
So
and
we're all in this together.
yeah,
All of us, all in this together.
yeah, count me on that crew too.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, okay, that's awesome. So your name is Otto Gallaher, as I mentioned earlier in the intro. How did you end up with the most German and the most Irish names at the same time? Is that part of your eclectic personality?
Yeah, and interestingly, it doesn't. The first name Otto doesn't direct. Although I do have German heritage, it doesn't directly tie to that. I mean, you've got to go back. I mean, none of the. I've done a ton of genealogy research. I've got uncles and other family members who've done a ton of research. I've yet to find a single ancestor of mine that came to the United States. They all came to the colonies, and so unlike a lot of people, there aren't any. My great grandparents didn't come here from someplace else. We've been here a long time. I'm descended from two signers of the Mayflower Compact. We've been around a long time on this continent, but I do have German heritage and obviously Irish heritage, with Gallaher. But the true background behind my name is that my parents' names are Mike and Sue, and when they were growing up, they were always in class with 2 or 3 other Mikes and Sues. It was a very common name, and so they wanted their kids to have less common names. And Dad said there was an old man that lived down the street from him when he was growing up. His name was Otto, and everybody always kind of liked the guy, and so that's where the name came from. I think the fact that it only requires 2 letters, which are very simple letters to form, they probably had some inkling of my capabilities down the road, and being able to spell it the same forward and backwards with, is probably, that's been beneficial at times in my life.
So you'd be the same coming and
That's
going.
right.
That's what they had in mind. It's funny how you sort of name names you want your kids to be original. Sometimes people do it with spelling, sometimes they do it with the name.
Right.
So, like my youngest daughter's name is Eden, and I figured she won't have another kid in her class named Eden.
Yeah.
And then before she was a year old, we had met 6 other Edens who were about her age. So I don't know if they were ever in the same class together, but people aren't as creative as they
Right.
think they
Yeah.
might be.
Although I will say,
So tell me a little bit more.
I can
Go
count
ahead.
on one hand the number of Ottos I've met in my life. So
Me too. I think I met 2. So tell me a little bit more about your Mayflower ancestors. How did you find out the connection to them?
yeah, so my mom's grandma, so my great great grandmother, her maiden name was Cushman. And if you know much about the story of the Mayflower, there were 2 leaders of that community before they came over to North America. One was William Bradford, and the other one was Robert Cushman. And so that Cushman line, I mean, it's a direct line back to Robert Cushman. And Robert didn't actually come over; he came over. He made one trip over the next year, but his son Thomas came over and was under the care of William Bradford. And so Thomas then married the daughter of a guy named Isaac Allerton, and he's one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact. And then, if you're related to one, you're related to more than one, because there was a very small gene pool that they were swimming in. But so Thomas and his wife, their son married the granddaughter of Miles Standish, who is also a signer of the Mayflower Compact. So that's the connection there, is through the Cushmans, like that.
So is there a Mayflower Society or something that you're a member of?
It exists. I have not joined as a member. I don't know what the benefit would be, other than some bragging rights or something. I don't know. But
Bragging rights, probably.
But yes, there is a society out there. My mother's in the Daughters of the American Revolution. She's active with the DAR, but I've not. Yeah, I've never been much outside of the Boy Scouts and church. I've never really been much of a joiner anyway. I was never in a fraternity in college or anything like that, just because I've never been much of a joiner, I guess.
You actually just reminded me of something you told me about when we had lunch together a couple of weeks ago about your billiard society. You got to tell that story.
Yeah. So me and some of my buddies in high school, as we're getting to our senior year, and we're trying to, we weren't, we just made it possible for a lot of other kids to be in the top 10% of our high school class. And we're
Selflessly,
very selfless. Yes, absolutely. Always thinking of others. And we had a pool table at our house growing up, and that became kind of the gathering place after school on a lot of weekdays. My buddies would just come over, and we'd all hang out at the house and play pool. And Mom and Dad loved it because they always knew where we were, and they got to hear what was going on in everybody's life, so they kind of knew what all was happening. But so as the time progressed, we decided that, hey, we should form a billiards club for the high school. And we even got our chemistry teacher to agree to be the faculty sponsor of the billiards club. And then, as we were thinking it through a little bit more, I was like, well, gosh, it'd be handy if we all had a leadership position to put on our college applications. So we just decided we'd all be the president of the billiards club. And we did. We just said, yep, we're all the president. And a few of us, myself included, actually did put that on their college application.
Did that help you get into whatever school you wanted to? You ended up attending.
I went to Stephen F. Austin State University for my undergrad, and there was not a particularly high bar at the time to get into Stephen F. Austin, so I don't know how much of a make it or break it that was for me.
Yeah, some registrar probably saw your application and whoa, look at this
Yeah,
guy.
I'm sure.
That's impressive. He is the president of his high school's billiard club. That probably was the differentiator. That set you apart from everybody
I'm
else.
sure.
So as a last question here, and you're welcome to tell as much as you want about this topic, but tell me about some of the books you're currently reading.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so again, ADD, right? And I'm all kind of all over the map. But one of my so I love Texas history, and that's part of how I connected with you early on when you published your first book, and it's this narrative account of your family. I'm like, oh, I'm all over that. It's I love narrative history and firsthand accounts, and so I'm reading one of the books I'm reading is called A Quineno Remembers, and that's the folks on the King Ranch are called Quinenos, and it's written by Laurel Cavazos, and Laurel Cavazos was the Secretary of Education under both Reagan and H.W. Bush. He kind of spanned both of them, but he grew up on the King Ranch. He was president of Texas Tech University for a while, and then wound up in the White House. And he has a brother that we just renamed Fort Hood for. We renamed Fort Hood Fort Cavazos. Well, that's his brother, and this incredible family. Their dad, Laurel Senior, was started out as just a cowhand for the King Ranch, and wound up running one of the divisions, being a division manager for the King Ranch. And he was the dad, Laurel Sr., was at the Norias raid, which is a very famous raid. It happened about 1917 on the King Ranch on the Norias division, where some bandits showed up and they had to hold them off. The army hadn't gotten there or anything, but their dad was one of the key players in holding off the bandits at the Norias raid. And just a fascinating history. One of his brothers has written another book that I read. So I'm reading that because I love Texas history. I'm reading Jesus and Nonviolence by Walter Wink because it's stretching my understanding of things, and I like that. And just how there's always the idea of nonviolence that you see through Jesus isn't being a doormat. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a shifting the balance of power through nonviolence. So that's pretty interesting to think about. And then Trout Bum by a guy named John Gierak. It's just for guys like me that are trout bums and fishing bums in general. It kind of resonates. I don't know anybody else find that interesting. And then The Death of Sitting Bear by M. Scott Momaday, great poet who just recently passed away, but really, I love poetry. I'm a huge fan of poetry. And I say I like to read today's poets and yesterday's theologians. Like I'm not much for jumping on the bandwagon for the latest thing from whatever publishing company on theology. I'm like, yeah, I'll wait till you've been dead for a while, and if it's still in print when nobody's getting royalties off of it, it's probably pretty good. But the poets, they read who we are today, and so I like reading today's poets and yesterday's theologians.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. It's funny that you talk about poetry and making a sort of a connection to your college application and putting your billiards presidency on there. My senior year, I was actually our class poet.
Is that right?
We actually had a title in my high school called a class poet, and I didn't know about that. One day we were in our homeroom class, and our teacher said, "Well, today is the last day to submit your entry for the poetry contest to become the class poet." And I hadn't heard about that. I'd missed the whole memo. So I had about 2 hours, and I decided I'll write a poem and see what happens. And I won. So I got to sit on the stage with the valedictorian and got my medal, and that was pretty awesome. So that went on my college application too.
That's fantastic. What a great story. Do you still write?
All right, so it's more like lyrics now, and it's really just poetry since I don't play music and I don't really write melodies, but I call them lyrics. They're probably just straightforward poetry.
Yeah.
So I don't write as much as I used to, but I still occasionally do it. I have to be inspired, and unfortunately, most of my inspiration comes when I'm angry or depressed or something, and I don't want to get to that point to have to feel inspired to write. So I got to figure out a way to be happy and write something good. Maybe it's just the blues historian legacy in my family's history.
Yeah.
So I've really appreciated this conversation, Otto, and I know that we've talked a couple times. We talked in person once before, and we talked online before, and I hope we can continue the conversation. Again, I want to re-emphasize to some people who may be going through the mental health challenges that you mentioned. Reach out to somebody. There's always somebody who cares, somebody who you may not even realize cares about you. So,
absolutely.
And thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Mel. This is such a treat. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. Have been since you launched the podcast. Love your writing. What a treat. Thank you.
Thank you. So our guest today is attorney and chameleon, Otto Gallaher. So I appreciate him for being here. This has been a great conversation. So that's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go. That was Stories from Real Life with your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. See you then.